Hello, everyone, and welcome to Neurocracy. Today, we're joined by Dr. Jared Saletin, Associate Professor of Psychiatry and Human Behavior at Brown and Associate Director of the E.P. Bradley Hospital Sleep Research Laboratory, where he directs the Sleep and Neurodevelopment Research Program. He studies how sleep impacts learning and executive function in both typically developing children and adolescents, as well as those with significant difficulties in daytime behavior. His work shows that even relatively small disruptions in nightly sleep can predict measurable changes in cognitive function in youth. Dr. Salatin, thank you so much for joining me today.
Thanks for having me.
So my first question for you is, what actually drew you first to study sleep?
That's a great question. I wish I had a great answer. The true answer is serendipity. And I think, particularly for students thinking about, career paths and in science or wherever your life takes you, serendipity sometimes drives the ship. So I was a psychology major in college. I've always loved science ever since high school. I've absolutely loved science. I used to want to be a pediatrician.
Okay.
And that becomes relevant because I work with kids today.
Yeah.
But, I used to want to be a pediatrician, and then I had a brief moment where I wanted to be a computer scientist. I still write a lot of code, but I would never call myself a computer
Okay.
scientist.
Yeah.
When I got to college, I started studying psychology, which I just found incredibly fascinating about how our brain creates our behavior, what that behavior is, how do we measure it. And I needed somewhere to be the summer after freshman year because my father was getting remarried.
Okay.
And I looked for internships near home and I found an internship in a sleep research lab. So I
Okay.
would love to say that I was passionate about sleep from the beginning. I was interested in it,
Yeah.
but I really fell into it. But then once I started working in the sleep lab, even as an undergrad, I really did fall in love with it as a science because it is such a clear mystery.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
Why do we do
I agree.
this?
Yeah.
Why do we take ourselves out of our environment
Yeah.
and open ourselves up to this risk of lying still and dormant for 8 hours at a
Yeah.
time? It's
Yeah.
such a fundamental mystery, and I think that's why it's
Yeah.
so exciting.
That's like word for word, like my fascination with sleep and why I'm interested in it too. And you know what's funny? My interest with sleep also started with an internship here at WashU. So that's pretty funny. But
Yeah, you
yeah,
fall into these things, and all of a
right.
sudden you pull threads, and those threads become interesting, and they reveal more interesting things. And I've never gone away from it.
Yeah. So my next follow-up question and kind of similar question is how did you get interested in studying adolescent brain development? And I know you just
Yeah,
mentioned your aspirations to be a pediatrician, so I'm curious how that all ties together.
yeah, I think that's, sleep, of course, affects, so much of our lives, right? We spend a third of our life doing it.
Yeah.
And it affects our health, it affects our brain function, our mental health, our physical health, and that has consequences throughout the lifespan. When I was getting in graduate school and I was getting my PhD, I was studying sleep's effect on learning and memory. And we were doing a number of experiments like you learn a list of words or a set of items and then you take a nap and then we test you on those items and we see that after the nap your cognition's improved and actually features of sleep during the nap are related to how much improvement you get. And conversely, Sanjay, you take sleep away, you sleep deprive someone and cognition suffers.
Right.
And when you're doing those basic psychology experiments, you're oftentimes looking at young adults, and we would see changes in cognition. And when we think about, okay, well, why does this matter? Why does learning matter? And the ability to learn information. I started thinking a lot about, well, when in life do you really need to learn information? And that gets you, I think, back to teenagers and
Yeah.
adolescents, where
Yeah.
we task students with going to school every day. That's the job. Go to school, learn the best you can, in engage in material, find interest, find passion. Well, that's the exact same time of life where we actually systematically, at least in this country, in the US, do everything we can as a policy often to make it hard for kids to sleep. Now, I say that a little tongue in cheek because we're not seeking to do that. But the resulting policies that we put on kids have that result. We schedule school at a time where
Right.
teenagers' biology struggles to keep up. I know you spoke with Dr. Mary Carskadden
Yeah.
about this, and we know so much, and she's a colleague of mine, and we know so much about what we know from adolescent sleep because of her pioneering work.
Yeah.
We know that teenagers need to go to bed a little bit later, wake up a little bit later, and as
Yeah.
a result, go to school later. So I became very interested very quickly, and well, it seems to me that the real importance of sleep and learning, we should not just be studying adults, but we should be studying kids because kids have to learn in their
Right.
day-to-day task, and sleep is challenged. And so that's where we should be focusing.
Yeah.
And so that was really what started this push back to studying kids. As I said, once upon a time I wanted to be a pediatrician, so it felt a little bit of a full circle,
Yeah.
but focusing on kids because they both have an incredible need to sleep in a very particular developmentally appropriate way, but they also have this remarkable demand for learning that we place on them.
Yeah.
And so the need for sleep to support that learning became very clear.
Yeah. So my next question is kind of a follow-up of this idea of sleep and learning and youth, right? So in one of your studies, you've shown that a small nightly restriction in sleep can impair an adolescent's ability to differentiate between like similar memories.
That's
So can you
true. Yeah.
elaborate on that and kind of the implications of these findings?
Yeah, so this is a brand new study that we just did.
Okay.
I appreciate you mentioning it.
Yeah.
When we talk about taking a little bit of sleep away, we've done experiments where we keep you up the whole night, right?
Oh, wow.
That's very artificial.
Right.
And we know that if you keep someone up the whole night, their mood suffers, their learning suffers. And actually you perceive it pretty well, right? You know you're
Yeah.
impaired, right?
Yeah.
Well, we know from adults that you don't have to keep someone up the whole night to make a difference in their performance. You can actually shrink their sleep a little bit day by day, and over time that builds up.
Okay.
And that's really what teenagers do, right? When you're going to school, particularly in the U.S., the average 11th grader loses about 2 hours of sleep a night on a school night. And we don't think about that as a lot. That's just 2 hours, right? Maybe you take a little bit, a little bit of sleep loss in the beginning, a little bit of sleep loss at the
Yeah.
end. But if you build that up over the course of a week, that's
Yeah.
9 to 10 hours, right?
Yeah.
And so all of a sudden that looks like a lot of sleep, and it is.
Yeah.
And so we've become interested in understanding, okay, well, what are the consequences of that for learning?
Yeah.
And so we're doing an experiment. We're actually doing it ongoing right now, where we model that in teenagers. So we recruit teens. These are actually teens that some of them have traits of attention deficit hyperactivity disorder, or
Okay.
ADHD,
Yeah.
which was not part of this experiment, but it's part of the sample.
Okay.
Um, and we're asking questions about, okay, well, how do these kids respond to different amounts of sleep loss? And so what we do with kids, Sanjay, is we put you on a schedule. And we say, okay, well, what time do you have to wake up for school? Let's set a schedule to that. So let's say you have to wake up at 6:30 to make school. Well, we're going to set you for a 10 hours in bed sleep schedule. So 6:30 would be your wake up time, and bedtime to wake up at 6:30 would be on 10 hours. You'll help my math. 7:30, I think,
Okay.
to make 10 hours. It's a lot of
Right.
sleep.
Yeah.
Um, and Or rather 8:30. I know I was off by one.
Okay. Yeah.
So then what we do, so we put you on that schedule. We put you on that schedule for about 10 nights. We get you really stabilized, and we monitor
Yeah.
your sleep using wrist-worn monitors
Okay.
and sleep diaries. And then we come in and we have you do some cognitive tests. We actually do some of it in a brain scanner because we're interested in looking at brain activity during
Okay.
learning. The
Interesting.
stuff in this paper was a performance task, very simple performance task. We're going to show you a series of images, some of which are indoor type objects, like this water bottle right here.
Yeah.
Some of them might be outdoor objects, like a pine cone. And
Okay.
you're just rating indoor, outdoor, indoor, outdoor. And that's just to keep knowledge that you're going to be keeping attention to these images.
Yeah.
And then after about 20 minutes, we show you some more images, some of which you've seen before. We want to know, do you recognize them? Some of which you've never seen, and we want to know, can you correctly tell us you've never seen them? And then we play a little trick on your memory system. We show you some images that are very similar to ones
Right.
you've seen before, but different.
Yeah.
This is a really important thing from learning perspective because we have different learning systems in our brain, and a lot of our learning, Sanjay, just operates on familiarity, right? I don't need to know for sure that I've seen something in the past. I just need to know that I've seen something like it.
Yeah.
I've been familiar. Well, that's a very rough memory judgment. There are other times where our memory systems have to make very particular decisions. No, I need to be confident. I need to know for sure that that's the thing. Well, that type of confidence is much harder to do. And we've shown in adults that total sleep deprivation, a whole night of staying awake, impairs the ability of the brain to make that choice. And so, what we showed in this literature, or in this study rather, is that we can show a similar effect, but not with a total night of sleep deprivation, but by taking sleep away a little bit at a time. So we have those 10 nights of 10 hours in bed.
Yeah.
Then we give you 5 nights of 7.5 hours in bed. So
Okay.
that's not a lot of sleep loss. It's
Right.
going to bed about an hour and a quarter later in the evening and waking up about an hour and a quarter earlier in the morning. So we just shift sleep just a little bit, take it away night a little bit by little bit. You're probably not impaired after one night of doing that, but we do it for 5 nights.
Okay.
Why? Because it's a 5 night school week, right? So we're sort of putting into play here
Yeah.
Sunday night into Thursday night and then asking, okay, how are you learning on Friday? And we
Yeah.
showed that even that subtle difference deteriorated the ability of the brain to make that memory judgment. And I think that that's pretty profound
Yeah.
because these kids are not sleep deprived. They've
Right.
just lost little bits of sleep.
Yeah.
And even that little bit is enough to make a difference in the learning system.
Yeah. And I mean, I guess that's especially relevant to me as a senior in high school. So the past 4 years, I've been like, with my friends and myself, like losing sleep, I guess, in ways. But I guess one of my questions is a lot of us try to recover sleep
Yeah.
on weekends. So I wanted your perspective on that. And it's a question I've asked other people, but I just wanted to hear it from you, given like your background and what you just described, the study on youth and learning. How does trying to recover sleep on weekends help or not help this kind of idea that we're losing sleep throughout the weeks?
Can I ask you what's the latest you've slept in on a Saturday?
Ooh. Okay, summer's like very long, but I'll keep it to the school year because that's like more controlled. Probably, I'd say like 10:30 a.m.
Okay,
How
that's
about
better than so when I was your age, I remember Saturdays sleeping until about 11 and my sister sleeping until about noon. And it's pretty remarkable, right?
Yeah,
Because sleep, and I'm sure your other guests have spoken about this, but
right.
sleep is regulated by two different processes, right? We
Yeah,
have the
yeah,
circadian rhythm. It's
yeah,
independent of how long we stay awake. It just happens. It's set by the light.
yeah,
And that tells us when we need to wake up and go to bed based on light. And that's what changes over the course of adolescence, right? It gets
right.
later in teens, and then it loops back in adulthood. But then
Yeah,
we have this other homeostatic system that's like a rubber band. The more you pull it back, the more it snaps back.
yeah,
And so the more sleep we take away, the more need for sleep you have. And that's why, we have this recovery sleep or the
yeah,
ability to need to sleep in. So, a teenager who says, look, I've had to wake up at 6:30 every morning for the past 5 mornings. I've slept 6 or 7 hours every one of those nights. I'm going to sleep in. That's the natural thing to do because when we don't get sleep, our body needs sleep. And so, on the one hand, that's important, right? We want you to get that recovery sleep. We need
yeah.
to feel rested. But what's the consequence of sleeping till 10:30 on Saturday when school starts? And I don't know when your school starts, but
7:30 a.m.
7:30
Yeah,
school. So what's the consequence of sleeping till 10:30 when you have to be up 6 or 6:30 on Monday morning?
right. Well, actually, I
You
mean, I'm up at like 5:55, so like maybe like
okay.
30 minutes before. But
So right, because you're trying to get as much in as you can.
yeah,
The reality is that where teens get caught is trying to both pay back the sleep debt that they've built up over the week, But then as a consequence of doing that, essentially phase shift their circadian rhythm. We have this concept called social jet lag,
Yeah. Yeah.
which is that you're living out of sort of in jet lag to the world around us. That's made even worse on the weekends when you
Yeah.
essentially go from waking up at 6 to waking up at 10:30. I mean, that's 4.5 hours. Think about that in terms of flying.
Yeah.
I'm here on the East Coast. If I was on the East Coast on all through my school week, and then I flew to California on the weekends, well, that's your 3 hour shift, and we're talking for some kids even more than that. And then you have to fly back on Monday morning. We would all feel like wrecks.
Right.
And this is what I try to tell parents and also teachers to try and help them understand
Yeah.
why kids are tired on Monday morning and throughout the week. So
Yeah.
what do you do about it, right?
Yeah.
So,
That's my next question, really. Yeah.
when I talk to kids and parents, I say, look, we want you to get some extra sleep because you need to make that up, but try to keep it more in the 1 to 2 hour range of sleeping in versus the 3 to 4 hour range of sleeping in. Because if you can do it in a little bit more moderation, well,
Yeah.
you're still going to get a little bit of benefit, but it's going to make Monday easier for you. Because if you're waking up at 10:30 on Sunday morning, then that's going to make Monday morning really hard.
Yeah. So continuing on this idea of like adolescent sleep and getting enough sleep, have you done any research or do you know anything about certain windows where stabilizing sleep has the most importance and the long-term benefits for cognition or cognitive development?
Windows in life.
Yeah, yeah,
Yeah, it's not a question that I've personally researched, but I think we have some sensitive windows that we're starting to understand.
right.
So there's if we just go sort of bottom up, right? You know, very early sleep in the first year of life has shown to be relevant for basic brain development, neurocognitive development.
Okay.
There have been a number of studies looking at preschool kids.
Oh,
I skipped over a lot of development there. I mean, there's other
yeah,
windows of
yeah.
time,
Right.
the nap transition, away from napping and early childhood. But I think about that preschool era because it's developmentally sensitive, but it's also cognitively vulnerable because you're in this school transition where so much new learning has to occur.
Okay.
And so there's a developmental window there that's been well studied, and then you advance beyond to the onset of adolescence, the onset of puberty, where sleep undergoes profound change, both in that circadian rhythm as well as in that rubber band like homeostatic process, both of which are changing in adolescence. And so teenagers are really vulnerable for some of these sleep changes, not just because of their biology, but because of what we're doing to the school at the same time, which is the era when they tend to be transitioning to middle school and then a couple of years later transitioning to high school, where the schools get set earlier and earlier.
Yeah.
So Dr. Karskadin, coined the term the perfect storm of adolescent sleep because it's all these factors coming together. It's the biological shift. It's the added academic and social pressures of the evening. It's not just
Right.
more homework, but it's, the social pressures of being a teenager, the need to be engaging with your peers, the need to find autonomy from your parents, the added difficulty of having a computer in your pocket
Yeah.
where you can reach all of your friends at once, no matter what time of day it is. All of these things come together
Yeah.
to make it, both biologically harder to go to bed early, but then also socially
Yeah.
gets in the way of doing it.
Yeah.
Well, then we hit you on the other side as well in the morning because school starts earlier and earlier. So we shrink sleep on both sides. So teenagers in that perfect storm sense, I think are the most vulnerable.
Yeah.
They're also the most vulnerable because it's the window of time where things like complex mood disorders, complex psychiatric
Uh,
conditions tend to
yeah.
be the most developmentally prominent.
Yeah.
So it's a real at-risk window, but it's also I love the way you phrase the question because it's not just highlighting the risk, it's highlighting the opportunity to do
Yeah.
something about it, right?
Right.
These are the windows of time where we can buffer sleep so that you and other teenagers can grow up more healthy and emerge happier, healthier individuals.
Yeah.
Sleep can make the difference. It can be the
Yeah.
thing that tilts the scale.
Yeah. And I think one of the things, so I'm currently like trying to draft legislation with my local senator for the state of Missouri to try to push back
Wonderful.
school start times. And one of the things that like really convinced her for us to like start working together is when I started talking about like the long-term like workforce. Like at the end of the day, like the people who are teenagers right now are going to be in the workforce in the next couple of
Yeah.
years, like studying and changing the world and being leaders, right? And
Yeah.
right now, I feel like personally, like the sleep loss and the early school start times are impacting that. And on top of this perfect storm, like you mentioned.
Yeah.
So my next question really was, do you see like schools in the next couple of years, and obviously it's going to take time, do you see schools pushing back, especially high schools, like pushing back their start times, or how do you kind of see that playing out in the next couple of
Yeah, I think it's going to happen. It's going to take a little while, and change
Right.
is hard, right? So
Yeah.
I had a policy professor in graduate school who told me the goal of policy is to make change on the margin, right? You're trying to chip away at the margin constantly to get to the eventual end goal. You don't shift, everything in one giant swoop.
Right.
And
Yeah.
that's a perfectly fine model. Now, what's interesting about school start times, though, is states like California took the other approach. They just said, we're going to do the entire state at once.
Yeah.
And we're going to make it so that no high school can start earlier than 8:30. And we're still waiting to see how that plays out.
Yeah.
But what I think is amazing now is compared to 10 years ago, we have the California legislation. We
Yeah.
have Florida's
Yeah, I
legislation,
do know.
which
I was
was
about to say Florida is
right,
also, yeah.
which they essentially copied the California legislation word for word. And
Yeah.
I think the California change has been held up a little bit, but the legislation is there.
Yeah. Yeah.
We have all of these tools now that we didn't have 10 years ago. What we did have 10 years ago was the data
Yeah.
starting to suggest that sleep is critical, it's necessary, it's important. We had small district level changes particularly in Minnesota, where some of the early studies got done. We now know that when you delay school start times and you open up the opportunity for developmentally appropriate sleep, kids are happier, their teachers are happier, graduation rates are improved,
Yeah.
tardiness goes
Those are
down.
two things I mentioned.
Yeah,
Yeah.
juvenile delinquency goes
Oh, yeah.
down. Um, Peer relationships are improved. Kids are less stressed. There's data to show that standardized test disparities between different
Oh,
groups shrink.
yeah.
The one thing that has been more complex is grades per se,
Yeah.
but there's some evidence that GPAs can improve.
Yeah.
But academics is more than just grades. It's all these other things that
Yeah.
go
Yeah.
along with it.
Yeah.
And when you talk about pitching your generation as the next generation, well, we care about graduation rates. We
Yeah.
care about mental health. We care about wellness. And all of those things get better. And so
Yeah.
sleep is kind of the tide that rises all the boats, right?
Yeah. Yeah.
The other thing that I love about school start times, and I'm on the scientific advisory board of Start School Later, which is an incredible
Oh, yeah. So
organization.
I'm actually, I was just talking to the
Yes, you
implementation
you
director.
interviewed Phyllis, I think.
Yeah. 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 Oh,
Yeah.
you saw that.
So,
That's cool.
so
Yeah.
that's the other thing we have
Yeah.
now, right? We have a toolkit. And what
Yeah.
Start School Later has done is they've said, well, you don't have to reinvent the wheel anymore. We have draft legislation, we have draft things, but we also have draft answers, right? So people will always ask questions. Well, what about transportation? What about athletics?
Yeah.
What about all these things? And what's nice now compared to 10 years ago is
Yeah.
we have those answers, right? We
Yeah.
now have models worked out for, okay, well, if you're going to do this in a rural district, here's what the consequences for busing is going to look like. If you're going
Yeah.
to do this in an urban district, here's what those consequences look like. Big district, small district. Here's what's going to happen to athletics. One of the constant questions we always get is, well, if we start school later, aren't kids going to be practicing really later into the
I know that's
afternoon?
one of the things my school had like a
It's a
push for
it's
it,
a
but
it's
yeah.
it's the question that we always get.
Right.
But now we have answers to show,
Yeah.
well, actually, it doesn't make much of a difference because in practice, oftentimes kids are waiting around for their coaches to come anyways. They're not really ready to go. We have answers for these things. And the
Yeah.
other thing that I think will help moving forward is the economics of it.
Yeah. That's
So,
literally like the biggest thing I pitched is that
yeah,
that was,
it's
yeah. Yeah.
actually economically viable,
Yeah.
right? Because as we look towards how do we make improvement on education in this country,
Yeah.
we often talk about interventions like, okay, we're going to have smaller classrooms, we're going to have a better teacher ratio, we're going to have better teacher training, we're going to change the busing, we're going to do all these other things. All of that costs money.
Right.
Well, the moving of the school start times is economically a better bang for your buck.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
so for me, it's a no-brainer.
Yeah.
Kids like it. Their teachers like it because their kids are better and happier. Parents like it because their teens are better and happier.
Yeah.
And it's about finding some equilibrium. And
Yeah.
and again, we don't have to do it all at once. It's not necessarily one size fits all.
Yeah.
And it doesn't have to necessarily be so drastic as, an hour and a half. All I care about is that we make a little bit of room for sleep. And you
Yeah.
give kids the opportunity to not just sleep more, but to sleep in a way that's better aligned to their biology.
Yeah. So for my final question here, so policy change obviously takes a lot of time, but as a sleep researcher and someone with a lot of expertise in the field, what is one piece of advice you would have for a teenager or someone just struggling with sleep like right now? And what's one piece of advice that they could implement right now today for them to have better sleep and better aligned, be better aligned with their circadian rhythms?
I, I think it's a great question. We can all do a little bit better actually on this. I think parents, adults, kids. So, we talk a lot about sleep hygiene,
Yeah.
which is sort of these general practices, right? But let's go one level up. Just start to consider sleep as part of what it means to be living your healthy best person, right? We've come a long way in how we talk about physical activity and how we talk about nutrition, right? We spend a lot of time thinking about what we eat. Where does it come from? What is the source of our food? What are we putting in our bodies as fuel? And then how do we use that fuel, the physical activity? Well, those are two sort of foundations of health. The third foundation, the third level is sleep. Sleep is actually necessary for you to make good on all that other investment, physical
Yeah.
activity, nutrition.
Oh
Sleep
yeah.
helps all those things.
Yeah.
So we don't have to transform our sleep overnight, but just start considering sleep as one of those important factors. One of the things that's really important to know about sleep is you can get a bad night of sleep and you're going to be largely okay. I want people to think not just about maximizing tonight's sleep, but prioritizing how you consider sleep in your life moving forward, right? Take
Yeah.
little bits of it at the edge, just a little bit more every night, a little bit more aligned, and finding those behavioral things that help that for you. I think one of the things that even I'm working on is our phones,
Oh
putting our
yeah.
phones down, turning
Yeah.
them off, using that do not disturb function
Yeah.
at a certain hour so your phone stops blinking.
Yeah.
Maybe charging it not by your bed, charging it at your desk or charging it somewhere else. Those very little simple things are what's going to start making a difference and helping you think about, okay, how do I go to bed in a way that's going to give me a good night's sleep? And if I don't get a good night's sleep tonight, know that that's okay. We all go through that. And then just go back at it the next day.
Yeah.
Sleep is one of those health behaviors. And it's just something that if we start integrating it into our lives without that mentality of it being disposable, but
Yeah.
rather having a mentality that it's essential,
Yeah.
and really that shift in mindset is something that's going to pay dividends. I think particularly for teens like yourself, you guys are at an age where the world is setting schedules for you.
Yeah.
But pretty soon in your life, you're going to set your own schedule.
Yeah, that's true.
And it might be in university where you decide what classes to take and when to take them if there's different sections.
Yeah.
It might be when you get to the workforce and you think about what are the different types of jobs and what schedules do I want to have.
Yeah.
Understanding how you can set yourself up. Okay, how much sleep do I really need to feel my best? Am I a morning person? Am I a night person? What do I need my bedroom to look like so I feel comfortable to go to sleep? Really start thinking about what that sleep identity is for you, is going to help you carve that healthy sleep habit moving forward into your life.
Yeah. And on that note, thank you so much for joining me today and sharing your advice and insights today. It was very interesting talking to you about, I think this is probably the best conversation I've ever had on this podcast about school start times, just because a lot of stuff you said is stuff that I've been looking at recently too. So it's amazing to hear everything, and it's inspiring to hear all the work that you're doing to support people like me and make it normal and understand that like learning can be difficult without
Well,
support.
I love that you're into this topic. I mean,
Oh,
you're working with your senator on some legislation. That is incredible.
oh,
You know,
thank you.
please reach out if you need any assistance. Again, you know I'm not here speaking on behalf of Start School Later, but
Right.
there's an incredible amount of resources on their website, as I know you
Yeah.
already know, and really just helping spread this message that
Oh,
sleep is a part of health. And particularly for teenagers like yourself, it's just critical to have a good day.
yeah.
And so, thank you for the work you're doing and spreading these awareness for these topics. Thank you for having me and
Yeah.
my other colleagues on this channel.
Yeah. Thank you.
It's been a joy. Thank you very much.
Yeah.